After 14 classical games in this World Chess Championship match, the score between Ding Liren and Jan Nepomniachtchi was 7-all. That meant they went into a tiebreak. 4 rapid play games, 25 minutes on the clock per player, plus 10 seconds increment per move. Now, in this first video, I'm going to take you through the first 3 rapid play games, and then the 4th game deserves a video all of its own. So here we go. In this first rapid game, Ding has white, and he played c3. So he's continuing his strategy of playing slightly offbeat openings. This could easily go into a London system, but after c5, well, in fact, Ding declines to play bishop f4. Instead took on c5. So now we've got a kind of reverse Slav. e6, and now something very unusual. Bishop e3. Looks so ugly to put the bishop here blocking the pawn. But it has been played before. Yes, it's been played by Ding's second, Richard Rapport. But it looks pretty odd, has to be said. But bishop g2, now it looks less odd now that this bishop has actually developed to g2. But still, I mean, this piece is quite vulnerable to this attack. b4 guards the pawn. And black certainly has compensation here. Knight g4, and the bishop goes to d4. So there's some interesting tactics here already. If e5, then white is going to respond with h3. Something similar happens in the game. Let me just show just one tactic very quickly. This is not forced, but look at this. Knight takes pawn. And now queen b1 attacking the knight and attacking h7. That's rather nice. But Nepo played queen c7. Castles, and then went e5. So clearly this move h3 has to be played. Could just drop the knight back actually. But Nepo goes in for these exchanges. And then takes on b4. So he's managed to, break down this pawn front. a3. The knight is attacked. Bishop f6. Attacks this knight here. Rook c1. The position is about to settle any moment. Bishop takes knight, rook takes, knight c6. So material is even for the moment, but another exchange, queen takes, pawn and bishop takes. So finally, after all those exchanges and captures, the position has settled. Material is even. It's actually quite an interesting position, quite dynamic. You've got this bishop stretching across the board. There's some kind of latent pressure on the pawn on b7. If white can organise an attack on the b file, that could be quite nice. But black is pretty solid. But this next move by Ding really kind of stirs things up a little bit. Knight g5. So the threat is to play queen e4, attacking the loose bishop and the h7 pawn. And this gets quite tricky. So h6, one could still play queen e4 here. Actually, that's quite an interesting continuation. But Ding wanted to keep more tension in the position, and he just dropped the knight back to e4. Well, this is interesting because that knight is going to land on that juicy square d6, and that looks like an octopus knight to me. Looks lovely. And if bishop takes, well, I mean, that gives white very good compensation for the pawn. Those pieces are beautiful. Nepo played rook e8. e3, and he found a really interesting idea, actually. Remember, this is rapid play. The players have to some extent just play on instinct. Rook d8, knight d6. There's a wonderful octopus knight, but how stable is it? That's the question. Rook h5. So this is Nepo's idea. Switching to the h file. So this is classic Nepo, he does like to attack, and that rook is very active. And this is a key position in this game, because if Ding gets it right here, then he has such strong pieces, potential pressure here, and these rooks are split. That's not good. If this attack doesn't come off, then white is just very well placed. But Ding got it wrong here. He played what looks like a natural move, rook b1, but he should have switched that queen over to get out of that pin. Or another alternative is just to play queen c2 as well, but stepping out of that pin is the really important part. But Ding played rook b1, and Nepo had prepared an excellent riposte here, knight e5. This is very dangerous indeed, and suddenly these pieces are massing on the king's side. So for example, rook takes b7 loses to a knight check, and then rook h1, and obviously king f1, knight takes, and that's check. So white has to be very careful here. Therefore e4 played by Ding, but now another excellent move. The point of e4 of course is to cover f3. Now another excellent move from Nepo, b6. So this undermines the knight support, and this is really tricky. Pawn takes pawn. This is possible because that can't be played because of this, b7. But a takes b6, excellent move, really tricky. So again, rook takes c7 is a mistake because of this check. And again, that just leads to mate. But Ding has a move here. Now, it looks desperate with the knight attacked, but actually knight b5 saves white's skin. It's very close. And now we have an exchange. And here, well, material is even. If white wants to play on, you could try knight d3. That's perhaps, the only chance to do that. But Nepo went bishop h3. And after this, well, the danger had largely passed for white, particularly after this move. Very nice pin. And yeah, could get tricky for black actually. This prevents knight g4, of course. So rook d1, Nepo actually found a good way out. Rook d1 and rook here. And this forces a draw. So after knight check, rook takes. Obviously, rook takes rook. Can be met by king takes rook. And, well, I mean, even that is possible. But after, yeah, I mean, it is possible to play like this for black. But, well, there's no point. I mean, that would be a draw as well. But instead, Nepo forced the draw straight away with the check. If the king comes up, then black is winning material. But instead, Ding just put the king back, and then we have this, and yeah, they repeated the position, and that's a draw. So, actually quite an interesting first rapid play game. So let's move on to rapid game number 2. So we have Nepo playing with white. First game drawn. This is the second game. Nepo playing with white. Just a second. Here we go. And Nepo sticks to his tried and tested e4, and Ding sticks to playing e5, and Nepo sticks to the Spanish and this line with d3. So this is very similar to anti-martial systems that white is playing with this solid pawn structure. And the reason that white can try to get some advantage here is because that bishop is better than that bishop. That's the start of it, basically. Also, you can sometimes try to exploit the fact that this pawn is on b5 and try and weaken these queenside pawns. Now we've previously seen a3 in this position in the match. We've seen c3, but Nepo goes for a4. So obviously there was a threat to exchange, to take on b5. So now the rook is protected. h3 and bishop e3. Well, we haven't seen this exact position, but we have seen Nepo play this move, bishop e3, which I find a little bit unusual. I don't particularly like it, but it's better than when we saw it in the other position, actually. Here, white can still play the knight c3. Ding played knight a5, attacking the bishop, which moved back. And then he decides to take on a4. Well, that is certainly a bold move, because it does rather mess up black's pawns, but Ding probably hoping to get some play down the b file. But after bishop d2, yeah, this is problematic. The knight is attacked. It came back. I don't think it really makes sense to play c5, because after this, I think this pawn is going to drop anyway, and white has good control over these light squares. So Ding put the knight back on c6, and then played rook b8. Could, I don't know, instinctively I just want to give back that pawn and mess up white's pawns actually. But instead he persisted with rook b8. And now I prefer white, because white risks nothing in this position and simply has quite a nice pawn structure. But Ding's hoping to stir up play. There's some obviously pressure here. That's defended. But white has such a nice pawn structure, and this is a weak pawn. And now Nepo exchanged on d4 and played bishop f4. I mean, this is very nice, because if you get in e5, that's going to break up these pawns, which not very pleasant for black. You know, positionally, white is doing very well here. It's even possible sometimes to take this pawn on a6. I mean, that would give black some play, but I think the way that Nepo did it, particularly, you know, in this rapid play game, I think is excellent. You know, there's no point in calculating whether it's possible to take the pawn on a6. Why give black play? Instead, he plays very sound moves. Rook e1, he's just looking to break with e5, which gives white a big positional advantage, because these pawns are completely safe. But once the exchange of these pawns happens, these pawns, then black's queenside pawns really look rather ragged, and there are a lot of loose squares. I like the bishop on f4, could well gain a tempo against the rook as well. a5, okay, can't be taken now, not immediately. And here, I mean, there are several ways for white to continue. You could drop the bishop back to one of these squares and go for e5, and then there's no tempo here. You could also exchange on e6. Nepo went for queen f3, also reasonable. Rook b7, and then he broke with e5. Knight d5. An exchange on d6. Could drop the bishop back. And maybe leave black to exchange. I mean, white has such a pleasant position here. But Nepo played in a very straightforward way, just exchanging and playing queen e4. You know, it's hard to criticize these moves. White is certainly better here. As I said, after the exchange of pawns, black's pawns really look rather weak. The queen threatens to take on d4. If the pawn comes here, well, that's a permanent target for the knight. Queen e5 could happen. Doesn't look good for black at all. So here Ding played actively. He went for knight f4. You could also try knight b4, but I mean, whichever move black plays, black is worse here. Queen e5. An exchange. and bishop takes c4. And here, rook b4 by Ding. You know, he's trying to stir up trouble here before white manages to grab a pawn and consolidate. And the idea of rook b4 is if white plays b3, then black will be able to play d3, undermining the support for the pawn on b3, and black can liquidate. And here Nepo thought for about a minute and played rook c5, but this was not the most precise move. It's in this situation where really he had to find some an exact continuation to try to force a win. g3 was a possibility. Now taking is no good. Knight is trapped. But knight e6, let's have a look at this. Then b3, with the knight back here, it's d3 is not quite as good. But let's see how things might go. So just to say this did not happen, but this is a very plausible continuation. Now watch out for a background checkmate. And after this, rook here and exchange. Well, theoretically, probably should be a draw, but white can still try to win that position. So that's the kind of thing that Nepo might have been able to play for a win. You know, the draw is certainly not guaranteed, and in rapid play one never knows. But certainly after Nepo's move rook c5, then after this move, an excellent move, then black is going to draw. And here's why. Because if, let's say, c3, it would be nice if this rook moved away, but rook takes knight. Here's the trick. Pawn up, the rook comes back, knight check, and knight c1. So the rook is blocked out of d1, the king can't step up, and the rook, that's crucial, can't move to the d file because of the pawn here. So d3 was a very clever move, and after this, well, the game just petered out to a draw with a mass exchange of pawns on the queen side. Now, both players tried. It certainly were really squeezing everything out of this position, but in the end, this one just went to a draw. Yeah, I mean, this endgame was a possibility earlier on in the match, actually. Without that pawn, it should be a draw. So there we go. A draw in the second rapid play game. This is the third rapid play game. So remember, the first two games drawn, but certainly not without interest. Ding with white. Nepo playing very solidly. I wonder, you know, this game could easily go into a King's Indian attack like this. That could lead to very sharp positions. But Ding plays steadily. You know, King's Indian attack, that's definitely not his thing. He's a great expert in these kind of Catalan positions. I mean, this one obviously came from Moretti, but yeah, with the kingside fianchetto. And b3. So Ding keeping it very quiet. You know, he's not risking his Catalan, which is interesting. Declined to do that throughout the whole match, probably fearing some preparation from Nepo. b3. c5. Black is claiming the centre in a very classical manner. An exchange. Of course, if pawn takes, then we get a kind of Tarrasch, followed by bishop b2. But knight takes, and knight c6. And, you know, black is ready to play bishop f6 in a lot of positions, and that rather frees black's position. And of course, yeah, there's b6 and bishop b7, after which Black really doesn't have any problems at all. So d4 strikes out, and queen takes, and bishop f6. Now, in such positions where black exchanges here, this is a typical Catalan position where this bishop on g2 is simply superior to the bishop on c8. This bishop on c8 is a massive problem, and white has such easy play in this kind of position. And this is a problem. But Nepo is well aware of that, of course, and very quickly played knight f4. I'm sure that he was aware of this position. It's actually been seen quite a few times before. Knight f4 is a nice move, nice tactic, because if queen takes, you can give a check. You throw in the check first, and then you recapture. And black is a clear pawn up. That knight is going to land on d4, and that's rather lovely. And if queen takes, then bishop takes b2. So white should take there. This is what happened. Queen takes, and now bishop takes b2, and the bishop comes back to f6. And this is actually a well-known position. There was a game Nakamura and So played not long ago which went rook b8, which is also possible. But Nepo put the bishop back on f6, just preempting knight c4. So again, we have a typical Catalan position where, once again, this bishop on g2 is superior to the bishop on c8. However, this bishop is a very nice piece, and that holds black's position together. Ding tried knight c4, rook b8. So black wants to play b6 and then bring the bishop into the game. Knight e5. Okay, it's a reasonable spot, but rook d8. In fact, there was a game between Artemiev and Duda which went e3 in this position. I don't think it really matters too much how white plays here. It's very hard to squeeze an advantage. But okay, Ding tried. Rook takes, bishop takes, and rook d1, bishop e7. You can see that the bishop covers these crucial squares, and yeah, the rook can't gain entry either. And black is ready to bring the king into the middle, after which there shouldn't be any difficulties, and of course the knight can be forced away. So Ding played knight d7, and Nepo compromised here by exchanging off. You could play rook a8 there, but it gets tricky. But this is by far the simplest solution. Black gives up the pawn on b7, but there are opposite colour bishops, and making anything of this position is extremely difficult, particularly if black plays well. Which Nepo did. After this move, well, Ding is perhaps thinking of rook a4, but bishop b4 shuts that out. It's not possible to create a passed pawn here. That's the problem. So white simply can't make anything of this majority. Therefore, Ding played rook c2, and after this exchange of rooks, well, that really does seal the deal. White certainly isn't going to make progress here without the rooks. And the players contrived to repeat the position 3 times, and they agreed a draw. There you go. So, after 3 games, everything was still level. 3 draws, 1.5 all. And that's when they went into the 4th rapid play game in this tiebreak. And I'm going to show you that game in a separate video, so hang on. I'll be back with you soon, and I'll go into a little bit more detail in the 4th rapid play game.